Hi, I'm Atlanta. Right after my sister's wedding, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your seaside apartment? It's just sitting there. I'll make it my happy home now." My parents nodded. "She deserves it more than you." I didn't scream. I just changed the locks. Then came the guilt trips, the fake brunches, the knock on the door with a copied key. What happens when your own family decides you don't belong in the life you built? Let me tell you how I made them remember. I do. The late afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains of my San Jose studio, casting long golden streaks across the worn hardwood floor. My small writing desk, tucked in the corner near the window, was scattered with pages from a project I hadn't touched in days. A half-finished cup of coffee sat cold beside my laptop. The room was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes right before something cracks. Then my phone rang. Even before I looked, I knew who it was. There was a chill that crept up my arms, a kind of psychic warning that had become all too familiar. Sable. I stared at the screen, her name glowing like a warning flare. For a brief second, I considered not answering, but instinct and habit won out. I swiped to answer, barely managing a hello, when her voice, crisp, cheerful, and unbearably self-assured, came through the line. "Atlanta," she said, like we'd just had brunch together. "That beachfront place you never use. I'm moving in." Just like that. As if she were commenting on the weather. As if what she'd just declared wasn't a bomb dropping into my life. My breath hitched. "Excuse me?" "You know," she continued, unfazed. "The apartment, the one in Monterey, it's been sitting there for months, and I need a place to reset. Mom and Dad said it makes sense. I'm starting over, and you're barely there." There was a strange silence that followed, hers filled with entitlement, mine with shock. "Sable," I began, trying to keep my voice even. "That apartment is mine. I bought it. Sweetheart," came my mother's voice, suddenly on the line. She'd joined the call, as if this were a scheduled family discussion. "You rarely stay there anymore. Your sister is going through a lot right now. She needs stability." Then my father. "Sable's had it hard. This could really help her. You've always been the strong one. You don't even like the beach." That last line twisted something in me. The beach. I had saved for that apartment for nearly 7 years. I used to sit on the balcony and write, the crash of waves my only soundtrack. It was the first place I ever felt like something truly belonged to me. And now, it was being handed off like a spare sweater. "She deserves peace," my mother said again. "Let's be fair. It's a compromise." My sister's voice was soft, like a lullaby. "Thank you for understanding, Atlanta. I knew you'd be supportive. Supportive." I gripped the phone harder, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. "When did any of you decide this was okay?" "You're being difficult," my father said sharply. "Come on now. Let your sister enjoy something for once." There it was again. That phrase, being difficult. The phrase that had followed me my entire life like a scarlet letter. I was difficult when I asked for a turn during family games. Difficult when I questioned why Sable's college was paid for and mine wasn't. Difficult when I said no. They spoke like I was some villain, hoarding luxury while my poor sister suffered. But I remembered the years I worked double shifts while attending night school. I remembered my hands blistering from weekends spent helping care for our grandmother when no one else would. All of it done quietly, because I didn't want praise. I just wanted fairness. I walked to the window, the sky outside dimming, the ocean in the distance just visible from my top-floor view. The same ocean that bordered my sanctuary, the same one they now wanted to hand over like some family heirloom that I had no right to own. I blinked hard, no tears. Then I turned, set the phone down, and crossed the room to my laptop. My heart thudded like a warning drum in my chest. I logged into the security app connected to my beach apartment. The feed was quiet, rooms bathed in late daylight, furniture undisturbed. My book still sat on the shelf, the woven blanket from my last trip draped over the couch. Everything was just as I left it. But now it felt threatened. I whispered to the screen, as if the walls could hear me. "Fine. If you think I won't protect what's mine, watch me." An hour later, I was on the site ordering a full security overhaul. 3 new indoor-outdoor cameras, a video doorbell with motion sensor alerts, a smart lock with remote access, and notification triggers for every point of entry. As the confirmation emails rolled in, I sat still, breathing deep, letting the quiet fortify me. My sanctuary may have been under siege, but it wasn't surrendered. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept checking the security feed every hour, half expecting to see Sable's car pull up with boxes, but the apartment remained untouched, for now. Still, I knew better than to trust the silence. What gnawed at me most wasn't just the betrayal, it was how easy it had been for them. How casually they had dismissed me, rewritten the story where I was the selfish one, and Sable the deserving hero. And I knew, with a certainty that burned in my chest, this was only the beginning. The first 2 nights after installing the new security system were quiet. The beach apartment sat empty, or so I thought. I spent the weekend in San Jose trying to convince myself that the worst of it had passed. My sister had made her declaration, my parents had sided with her, and I had decided to protect what was mine. That felt final enough for now. Monday morning came with fog and the smell of coffee drifting through my small studio. I had just sat down to check emails when my phone buzzed. A notification slid across the screen from the security app. Unauthorized entry detected, 9:14 a.m. For a moment, I froze. My hand hovered over the keyboard. Then, with one slow breath, I clicked the link and watched the live feed load. The front door of my seaside apartment eased open. Someone stepped in, holding a bouquet of white lilies and a shopping bag. It was Sable. She wasn't sneaking in. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She walked in like she belonged there, like she'd owned the place her entire life. She even smiled, that soft, curated smile she always used on camera. I watched her toss her sunglasses onto the kitchen counter, look around, and breathe in. Then she set the flowers in my grandmother's vase, the one that had survived 3 moves and still had a faint chip on the rim from the day I dropped it at 15. She opened a window, humming something cheerful, maybe that same song she played at her wedding. The camera caught her setting down boxes labeled his, hers near the bedroom door. My heart thudded once, deep in my chest, and then again, harder. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief solidifying into anger. I closed the app. I sat perfectly still for almost a full minute, then grabbed my car keys. The drive to Santa Cruz took nearly 2 hours. The highway was bright with morning light, and every mile that passed made the betrayal sharper. By the time I reached the coast, the sun was sliding behind a thin veil of clouds. The wind carried that cold ocean salt that once meant peace to me. Now it just tasted bitter. I parked 3 houses down, choosing not to pull into the driveway. I didn't want her to know I was coming. I walked the short stretch to the apartment, the sound of waves steady in the distance. When I reached the door, I entered my code quietly and waited for the soft click of the lock. Inside, I knew right away. The air smelled like vanilla candles and cheap perfume. My rugs were gone, replaced by something pastel and fuzzy. My grandmother's framed photo, the one that always sat near the window, was missing. I scanned the walls, the counters, the bookshelves. She had rearranged everything, even the chairs. I took slow steps through the living room, fingers brushing against the new throw pillows. They were embroidered with words. Love, home, happiness. It made me sick. In the kitchen, there was a mug left on the counter with lipstick smeared along the rim. The scent was unmistakable. Sable. I checked the fridge. My groceries were gone. A new carton of almond milk sat in their place. She never even liked almond milk. It was just trendy. I moved to the bedroom. The closet door was open. Inside hung dresses that weren't mine. On the nightstand, her phone charger, her perfume, and a wedding photo of her and her husband, framed in gold. I turned away before the tears could rise. My hands trembled. Downstairs, in the small entryway by the mailboxes, I noticed something new. A piece of paper taped to the buzzer panel. Under Ren A, someone had added a second name in neat handwriting, Everhart S. I ripped the tape off, crumpled the paper, and shoved it into my jacket pocket. Back outside, I leaned against the car, heart pounding. I needed to know how far she'd taken it. I pulled up her Instagram. The most recent post stopped me cold. Sable was standing on my balcony, hair blowing in the ocean wind. The caption read, "Starting our new married life by the sea, manifesting joy, love, and sun." She'd tagged the location, my address. The comments poured in. "So happy for you. Such a beautiful space. You deserve it all, girl." A few even mentioned how peaceful the place looked. Peaceful. I scrolled through photo after photo, her husband holding wine glasses in my living room, her dog curled on my couch, my grandmother's throw blanket spread across her lap. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took screenshots of everything, every caption, every tag, every timestamp. Then I sat back and stared at the horizon where the fog was thickening over the ocean. It wasn't just a home. It was every memory that kept me connected to my grandmother, the one person who had believed in me without conditions, and now it was a prop in Sable's endless theater of perfection. I pressed my palms against the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. I wanted to drive straight to my parents' house to ask how they could stand by and let this happen, but I already knew the answer. They would say it again. "Don't make a scene. Let her be happy." So I didn't drive away. I stayed parked there until the lights came on inside the apartment. From where I sat, I could see her silhouette through the curtains, laughing, moving from room to room, arranging, decorating. She had invaded my world, and everyone else seemed to think that was fine. That night, I went back to San Jose. I didn't even turn on the radio. My mind was a loop of her voice and my parents' excuses. The drive blurred by, headlights streaking past, the road stretching into darkness. When I finally reached my building, I sat in the car for a while before going in. The air in my studio felt heavy, like all the oxygen had been replaced with silence. I poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and opened my phone again. Her posts had gained more likes. My mother had even left a comment with a heart emoji. That small red heart burned worse than anything. I opened my notes app and started typing. My hands were steady this time. Change all locks. Screenshot every post. Call lawyer. Ask about informal eviction laws. I paused before writing the next line. My grandmother's voice drifted back to me. "You don't need to fight loud, just fight right." Fine, I thought. If this was the game Sable wanted to play, I could play it better. I added the last item to my list. Collect proof. Every detail. Every lie. Then I hit save and leaned back on the couch, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I looked out the window toward the dark stretch of highway that led back to the sea. "You want war dressed in white lace?" I whispered. Okay. I locked my phone, placed it face down on the table, and sat in the dim light, waiting for morning to come. Morning light crept across my apartment wall, the faint sound of cars humming below. I hadn't slept. The list I wrote the night before sat open on my coffee table, the phone screen dimmed to black. My mind replayed every word, every image, every choice that led here. Somewhere between exhaustion and fury, my thoughts drifted backward, back to a day wrapped in lace and lies. They say weddings bring families closer. That wasn't true for me. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been standing under a string of white lanterns in Napa Valley, dressed in a pale blue gown Sable had picked for me. "Something soft," she'd said, "so you don't stand out in photos." I didn't argue. I told myself it was her day. The vineyard stretched endlessly under the California sun, guests laughing, clinking glasses of champagne. My name card sat at the overflow table near the catering tent, Atlantis Wren, spelled wrong, as always. The main family table sparkled with gold-rimmed glasses and floral arrangements as tall as toddlers. My seat had a paper napkin. Sable floated across the lawn in her white gown, glowing under the photographer's flash. When she reached the microphone to give her speech, her voice trembled just enough to sound heartfelt. "I want to thank everyone who matters most," she said, eyes sweeping across the crowd. They passed right over me. My mother wiped tears. My father clapped. I smiled, small and polite, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. I sipped water, pretending not to notice when one guest asked if I was a distant cousin from out of town. I just nodded. It was easier than explaining I was the bride's sister, the invisible one. When the music started, I stood near the edge of the patio, watching couples twirl under strings of lights. A waiter handed me a glass of champagne meant for toasts. Before I could take a sip, my aunt appeared, laughing, and pressed a tray into my hands. "Honey, help serve these, will you? You're always so helpful." I didn't protest. I balanced the tray, weaving through laughter and silk dresses, handing out glasses while Sable posed with her new husband. She looked perfect, every hair in place, every smile choreographed. When they tossed the bouquet, someone tugged my sleeve and handed me another bottle instead. "Can you open this? The bar's swamped." So I did. I twisted the cork, forcing a grin when it popped. The bouquet landed somewhere behind me. Later, I slipped into the bathroom, my shoes pinching. Inside, the mirror was fogged from the heat of too many curling irons. I stared at my reflection. Lipstick faded, hair slightly frizzed, eyes tired. No one had noticed I'd been missing from the family photos. The door opened, and a woman I didn't know entered, adjusting her dress. She glanced at me and smiled politely. "You're the babysitter, right? You did such a good job keeping the kids calm during the ceremony." I almost laughed. "Something like that," I said, washing my hands slowly. She left before I could explain. I leaned closer to the mirror. Behind me, I could still hear the music, the laughter, the same old script where Sable starred and I filled in the empty space. That night, after the reception, I sat alone at a small motel nearby. I scrolled through social media, already flooded with posts from the wedding, tag after tag. At Everhart wedding, our dream come true. My sister glowing in every shot, my parents smiling behind her. I wasn't in a single picture. The memory used to sting quietly. Now it burned. A sharp vibration pulled me back to the present. My phone lit up with my mother's name. I hesitated, then answered. "Atlanta, sweetheart," she said, cheerful and distant. "Have you talked to your sister lately? She loves the apartment. Says it's been good for her anxiety." My pulse quickened. "Mom, I haven't given her permission to move in." "Oh, honey, don't start that again." Her tone softened into the kind of pity that always made me feel smaller. "You know how sensitive she is. Just let her settle for now. It's just a place." "Just a place?" I repeated quietly. "You've got your own life. Don't make this a big deal," she continued, the sound of dishes clinking in the background. "You always get so worked up about things that don't matter." I could hear my father in the distance saying something about the news, completely unbothered. "Mom," I said slowly, "do you remember who gave me that apartment?" She paused. "Your grandmother? Yes, but she'd want you to share. You've always been so, well, private. It wouldn't hurt you to be more generous." More generous. That word echoed long after she hung up. I sat there staring at the wall, her voice repeating in my head. "You know how sensitive she is." As if Sable's feelings mattered more than my existence. I walked to my closet and knelt down, moving aside boxes until I found the one I'd kept sealed for years. Inside were my grandmother's letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I unfolded the one marked in her neat cursive, "For Atlanta." The ink was slightly smudged in places, but her words were clear. "My sweet girl, this apartment is for you. You've given so much to this family without asking for anything. When the world grows too loud, you'll need a place that's just yours. Promise me you'll protect it." I ran my fingers along the page, tracing the loops of her handwriting. My throat tightened, but no tears came. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the box. In the corner of my room sat my old laptop. I opened it, the screen glowing dimly in the dark. I began documenting everything: dates, screenshots, conversations. Every small piece that proved what was happening. The sound of typing filled the quiet apartment. They forgot me at her wedding. They forgot me in every room we've ever been in. But they won't forget this. When I finished typing, I sat back and closed the laptop. The city outside was still awake, cars passing, someone laughing down the hall, a siren in the distance. Life kept moving, even when mine felt paused. I looked at the list still sitting on the coffee table and the single line at the bottom. Collect proof, every detail, every lie. I added one more sentence to the list before setting it aside. This time, they'll remember. I stood, poured myself a glass of water, and walked to the window. The night sky over San Jose was hazy, but somewhere beyond it, the ocean shimmered faintly. I imagined my grandmother standing there, her voice steady as ever. "You don't need to fight loud, just fight right." I whispered back, "I hear you." Tomorrow, I would start taking back everything they'd taken. This time, they won't forget what I'm capable of. The first light of dawn spilled gently across the bare floor of my studio apartment, casting long shadows through the blinds. I lay in bed, still wrapped in the weight of yesterday, staring up at the ceiling. My phone buzzed endlessly beside me, the screen lit with a storm of unread messages. I already knew what they said, could feel their judgment threading through the vibrations. I sat up slowly, spine aching like I had carried the weight of everyone's expectations all night. I reached for the phone, unlocking it not with curiosity, but resolve. The group chat had detonated overnight. Cousins, aunts, distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly found their voices. "She's your sister. How could you be so cold? It's just an apartment you barely use. Family means compromise. Don't embarrass us like this. She just got married. Can't you be happy for her?" I scrolled in silence. A missed call from Uncle Dewey. A voicemail I didn't bother playing. My fingers hovered over the reply box, but I said nothing, not because I had no words, but because none of mine would be heard. Instead, I set the phone face down on the table and sat there, still, breathing, letting the hum of the morning fill the spaces their voices tried to invade. By mid-morning, I was in my car, headed to Santa Cruz. The drive was quiet. No music. No calls. Just the sound of the tires on asphalt and the slow churn of my thoughts. The closer I got to the apartment, the clearer my focus became. Not anger, not vengeance, but clarity. When I arrived, the complex was still, touched with the soft hush of late morning. I parked in my usual spot, the one she had mocked as too far from the building. The apartment was locked. No scratches, no signs of damage. But the moment I opened the door, I felt it. The shift. She wasn't here, but her presence lingered like a scent you couldn't wash out. I stepped in, moving quietly, as though I didn't want to wake a sleeping beast. My breath slowed. Then I began. I pulled the small Ring camera box from my bag. 3 cameras, one for the front door, one for the hallway inside, one for the living room, facing the window, angled just right. I installed them slowly, deliberately, pairing each with my cloud account. Then came the smart lock, touchscreen, rotating codes, every access logged. I entered a new primary code and set it to expire in 2 weeks. Only I would know the next one. From my phone, I labeled 3 folders in the cloud drive. Proof 1, trespass proof 2, emotional abuse, proof 3, online false claims. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. Let them say I was being petty. Let them say I overreacted. But I whispered to the quiet walls, "You'll see I was patient." And then I opened the closet. There it was. Her wedding dress, ivory lace, full length, hanging right where my wool coats used to be. As if she had claimed this closet, this space, as hers now. A trophy, a mark of territory. I didn't touch it, just stood and stared. On the shelf nearby was a framed piece of calligraphy, the one that read, "She believed she could, so she did." It hadn't been mine. She'd brought it. She had brought her wedding dress, her calligraphy, her energy, her ego, into my apartment, into my peace. She had carved out her own little throne room here. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, but I didn't lash out. Instead, I pulled out my phone and recorded. I held the lens steady, my voice calm. Entry, 2:30 p.m. The wedding dress is here now. This is not a gift. This is invasion. Documenting all of this in case it's needed in court, or just for memory. I need proof I existed here. The camera caught the room, the shadows. My face, calm but hollowed. I ended the recording and set the phone down gently. Then, I picked up the dress and folded it into a storage bag. Not tossed, just removed. By the time I locked the door again, the weight of the act had set in. Every step back to my car felt heavier than the last. like I was dragging years of expectations behind me, not just from her, but from all of them. Back at my studio, I laid everything out like evidence. Footage, screenshots of her posts that called the place her little honeymoon nook. Photos of my things moved, boxed, replaced, the grainy image of her gown, the calligraphy, my now empty walls. It all hurt, but it hurt with clarity. This wasn't confusion. This was confirmation. Afternoon gave way to early evening. That's when it came. A calendar invite from Mom. Family brunch. Sunday, 11 a.m. Let's resolve this like adults. And below, a message from Sable. Don't bring negativity. Just love. I stared at those 4 words. Just love. As if what I was doing wasn't love. As if boundaries weren't love. As if silence wasn't love. As if choosing myself meant I had none left to give. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed, "If love means erasing me, I will erase that love." The sentence sat stark against the white screen. I didn't edit it, didn't rethink it. I simply let it exist. Outside, darkness swept in. I sat by the window, watching headlights glide along the street below. People moving through their lives. Unaware of the small wars fought behind studio walls, they wanted resolution painted in soft pastels, apologies in hushed tones, forgiveness in scripted smiles. But I wasn't here for theater. They'd mistaken my silence for surrender. Let them. From this point on, everything I did would be in full color, sharp lines, clear borders, and absolutely no room for erasure. The morning of the brunch arrived, dressed in sunshine, but the brightness did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. I drove to Capitola with both hands tight on the steering wheel, the hum of the highway filling the silence I refused to break. Every mile closer to my parents' house felt like approaching a stage I never auditioned for. The garden looked perfect when I arrived. Too perfect. My mother had arranged pale yellow tablecloths, crystal glasses catching the light, and slices of fruit gleaming like they'd been polished. The scent of peonies mixed with fresh coffee. It all looked harmless, but underneath it, I felt the tension waiting like static before a storm. "Atlanta!" Mom greeted me in that falsely bright tone she used for company. "You look tired. Sit, have a mimosa." 2 cousins flanked me as soon as I sat down, each offering me a glass as though the bubbles might dissolve the resentment. One leaned in with a forced grin. "You've been so quiet lately." "Everyone's worried." "Don't be," I said, setting the glass aside. "I'm fine." Mom's smile stiffened. "Let's just agree this whole apartment thing got blown out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" I echoed, my voice low, steady. Sable arrived then, late as usual, radiant in white linen, hair curled perfectly. She slid into her seat like she was stepping onto a red carpet. "Oh, Lan, you wouldn't believe the curtains I found for the bedroom," she said lightly. "Sheer linen, perfect for morning light." I met her gaze. "Funny," I said. "I don't remember giving you a bedroom." Her husband cleared his throat, pretending to focus on his coffee. My father busied himself slicing bread. The rest of the table went silent for a beat, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs. Sable just smiled, tilting her head. "You've always been territorial. It's not healthy." I let out a quiet breath. "And you've always been entitled." "That's not healthy either." Mom's fork clattered softly against her plate. "Atlanta, please," she said. "Not here. Let's keep this peaceful." Peaceful. The word had lost its meaning somewhere between my grandmother's will and Sable's social media posts. I stood up slowly. "You want peaceful? Then stop pretending theft is kindness." Mom rose halfway, voice tight. "You barely used that apartment. Sable's building a life. Why can't you support her instead of holding grudges?" "Because it was mine," I said simply. The calm in my voice scared even me. No one spoke. Birds chirped in the garden, oblivious. I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate and walked away. Outside, the air smelled of salt and lemon blossoms. I didn't look back. Later that afternoon, I met Bryn at a cafe near the marina, the one where we'd spent countless hours dissecting life and the strange weight of family expectations. She was already seated by the window, a coffee in hand, her gaze steady as always. "Rough morning?" she asked. "Define rough," I said, sitting across from her. It felt like being ambushed with smiles. Bryn chuckled softly, stirring her coffee. "You don't need to scream to win, Lan. Just be where you can't be ignored." "I've tried silence," I said. "All it's done is make them talk louder." "Then make your silence strategic," she replied. "People like Sable need an audience. You don't." Her words sank deep. I looked out at the water, at the boats rocking gently in the afternoon light. "She's turning my grandmother's gift into her trophy room." Bryn leaned forward. "Then take it back like it's your birthright." I smiled, small, but real. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple," she said. "Not easy, but simple." We sat there in quiet companionship for a while. The air smelled of roasted beans and sea breeze. For the first time in days, I didn't feel entirely alone. When I returned to my apartment that evening, the sky was bruised purple over the horizon. I dropped my bag on the counter and checked my phone. A notification blinked. One new message request. The text read, "Isn't this your place?" followed by a link. I clicked it. A real estate listing opened. My apartment, unmistakably. The photos were bright and staged. My walls repainted, my rug gone. Sable's throw pillows artfully placed on the couch. The caption read, "Ocean View Apartment, perfect for newlyweds. Private access, turnkey ready." My pulse quickened. At the bottom of the page, under Agent Contact, a name I didn't recognize. But the phone number, I knew it. It belonged to Mark, Sable's husband's best friend, a man who'd been at their wedding bragging about getting into real estate. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, heat building behind my ribs. Then I hit call. A cheerful voice answered. "Hi, this is Mike with Coastal Realty." "This is Atlanta Wren," I said. "You're listing an apartment that isn't yours." A pause. "Oh, there must be some mistake." "No mistake," I cut in. "That property belongs to me, and if it's not removed by tonight, you'll be hearing from my lawyer." The hesitation on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Understood, ma'am," he said finally, voice faltering. "We'll look into it." "Do that," I said, and hung up. For a long moment, I stood in the stillness of my apartment, heart thudding. My reflection in the darkened window looked older, sharper. My grandmother's voice echoed faintly in my mind. "You don't have to fight loud, just fight right." So I did. I forwarded the link and screenshots to my lawyer, then printed the listing and filed it in a folder marked Fraud Attempts. After that, I placed a new mini camera near the entrance and taped a notice inside the hall closet where only someone living there would find it. Unauthorized sale or representation of this property constitutes fraud under California law. I wanted them to see it. I wanted the message to settle in, to make their hands shake when they opened the door. Then I shut off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the city seeping through the curtains. I stood by the window, the ocean barely visible in the distance, silver under the moonlight. "Game on, little sister," I whispered. By sunrise, the sky over Santa Cruz was washed in pale gold, the kind of quiet morning that made most people believe peace was possible. For me, it meant clarity, a clarity that burned clean through the fog of hesitation that had hung over me for weeks. I'd made my decision sometime between midnight and dawn. There would be no more warnings, no more second chances, no more hoping they'd do the right thing. I would protect what was mine, calmly, legally, permanently. I took a deep breath and slipped the manila envelope into my bag. Inside were the printed screenshots of the fake listing, time-stamped security footage, and the yellowed original of my grandmother's handwritten will. I'd kept it in a box for years, but this morning, I knew it needed to be in safer hands. The city was just beginning to stir as I drove toward the UPS store on Pacific Avenue. I parked by the curb, locked my car, and walked in. The air inside smelled faintly of cardboard and printer ink. The man behind the counter smiled politely, unaware that I was holding my entire family history in my hands. "Signature confirmation and overnight delivery, please," I said. He nodded, weighing the envelope. "Legal papers?" I smiled faintly. Something like that. He stamped the label, slid the envelope into the bin, and handed me a receipt. I stared at the tracking number for a long moment before slipping it into my wallet. That string of numbers, that tiny sequence, was my insurance policy. Outside, the air was cool and smelled of sea salt. I walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop, found a quiet table in the corner, and ordered a black coffee. The barista wrote my name wrong on the cup, as usual. Alana. But I didn't bother correcting it. Some mistakes weren't worth fixing. I texted my attorney, Paul Benson, a simple message. Documents en route. Confirm receipt Monday morning. No action until I say. His reply came a few minutes later. Understood. Stay calm, Atlanta. And you're handling this perfectly. I smiled into my coffee. Perfect wasn't what I felt, but in that moment, it was enough. By the time I returned to my apartment, the late morning sun had turned the ocean outside into a field of silver light. The place was quiet, except for the soft hum of the security system running in the background. The cameras blinked green, steady, and faithful. I spent the afternoon cleaning, reorganizing, reclaiming every inch. I folded my grandmother's quilt over the back of the couch, wiped down the windows, and replaced the fresh flowers that Sable had left wilting in a vase. Each small act felt like stitching myself back together. Then, just after 8:00 p.m., the first alert came. Front door. Motion detected. I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. I set it down slowly and reached for my phone. The live feed opened with a soft click. There they were. My parents, Sable, and her husband, standing outside the door. My mother's expression was tense, my father's jaw set. Sable, of course, was in another white dress, like she couldn't appear in public without trying to look like a saint. Sable reached into her purse and pulled out a key, the copied one, no doubt, then slid it into the lock. The door didn't budge. She frowned, tried again. The keypad glowed red. Access denied, the system voice announced, flat and cold. Sable turned toward her husband, visibly flustered. She changed the code. My father stepped forward, knocking hard. Atlanta, open this right now. I watched them from the small glow of my phone screen, the image steady as a still life painting. My mother hovered near the porch, glancing nervously at the neighboring windows. Don't make a scene in front of the neighbors, she hissed. Sable threw her hands up. She's ruining everything. We had plans. I turned on the microphone linked to the speaker system. My voice came through clear and calm. You told me I didn't deserve this place, so why are you all so desperate to get inside it? Sable froze. My mother's face flushed. My father stepped back, shaking his head. You're being ridiculous, he said. This isn't how family acts. I smiled faintly at the screen. No, Dad, this is exactly how family acts when you let one of them steal from the other. My mother started crying. Real tears or performance, I couldn't tell anymore. She tugged at his sleeve, urging him toward the car. Sable shouted something I couldn't hear over the wind, her husband's hand tight around her arm. Then, one by one, they turned and left. The doorbell camera caught the final glimpse of their car pulling away, red taillights disappearing into the night. The sound of the ocean filled the silence that followed. For a while, I just sat there on the couch, staring at the screen. My pulse was steady, my breathing even. I thought victory would feel louder, triumphant maybe, but it didn't. It felt like quiet vindication. I replayed the footage once, twice, saving it to a secure drive. Then I uploaded it to the same folder I'd labeled Proof 3, Attempted Entry. When I finally put my phone down, the apartment felt larger somehow, like the walls had taken a deep breath. I walked to the mantel where my grandmother's photo rested, her smile gentle, eyes wise. I'm not scared anymore, I whispered. Her voice echoed in memory. You don't have to fight loud, just fight right. I poured myself a glass of wine and lit a candle on the kitchen counter. The flickering light danced across the room, softening the edges of everything. I started to clean again, not because the place needed it, but because I wanted to reclaim it, piece by piece. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and salt. Outside, the night deepened. I could hear distant laughter from the beach below, someone's dog barking faintly. Life went on, ordinary, unaware. Then my phone buzzed again. New email, subject line, your rights confirmed. For a moment, I just stared at it, heart steady, calm. I took another sip of wine, leaned back against the counter, and let the smallest smile cross my face. The city had just exhaled into night, a velvet hush settling over the streets. I sat cross-legged by the fireplace in the apartment, the one I had finally begun to reclaim, not just in body, but in spirit. The lights were dimmed, the walls breathing in amber from the fire's glow. Shadows played across the room like old memories trying to find their place. In my hands, I held the small wooden frame that had traveled with me for weeks, tucked into the inner pocket of my coat like a talisman. Inside it was the photograph of my grandmother, her smile worn soft from years of light and longing. She had always been the one who saw me, not the version my parents projected, not the image my sister needed to dismiss, but the whole of me. Tonight, that picture deserved more than to be hidden. I rose slowly, knees stiff, and approached the mantel. With careful fingers, I set the frame down on the center ledge. Then I reached into the drawer for something I had folded and refolded a dozen times. A letter. Her handwriting, slanted and precise, looped across the page like a quiet march toward truth. "This is yours," it read. I pinned the letter beside the photo, anchoring it like a flag on sacred ground. A candle rested beneath them, and when I struck the match and lit the wick, the small flame leapt upward, casting a soft, reverent glow. The room stilled. My voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "This is your home as much as mine." I sat for a moment longer, letting the heat from the fire wrap around me. Then I picked up my phone. Not out of impulse, but intention. I flipped the camera, held it toward the photo and letter, and recorded. Just 30 seconds. Just enough. "My name is Atlanta. This apartment was given to me in love. I won't let it be taken in silence." No theatrics, no hashtags. I shared the video privately with only a few trusted friends. But in this world, even whispers can carry. By the time the sun edged over the horizon, the world had turned. Reddit threads lit up with speculation. Did Sable steal her sister's home? Theories spun from breadcrumbs. Her bridal post with the apartment tagged in the background, screenshots from the wedding, and the bizarre listing on a real estate site that seemed to contradict her claims. TikTok sleuths picked it up next. Side-by-side comparisons, voice overlays narrating what they called the quiet takedown of an influencer's fake fairy tale. Someone even matched snippets of Sable's posts with clips from my old blog, highlighting the subtle theft of words and ideas. I hadn't noticed until then how deeply she had woven herself into what was once mine. I didn't speak. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. For once, silence was my ally. By the third day, the air around me changed. No call from Mom asking me to stop stirring things up. No texts from Sable cloaked in faux concern. The group chat, the one they always use to leave me out of, then screenshot behind my back, went dark. I knew something had shifted when I received a voicemail. It was from a cousin I hadn't heard from since the last family reunion. Her voice trembled. "Atlanta, I didn't know the apartment was yours. I'm so sorry." An aunt unfollowed Sable on Instagram. Another cousin who hadn't liked one of my posts in years tapped like on a photo I'd uploaded. A single pink camellia in a glass vase on the windowsill. No words, no comments, just soft signals. But I felt each one like the first drops of rain after drought. That evening, I went for a walk. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself at the library near the sea. The one where I used to volunteer during college, reading to seniors and helping kids with their speech therapy homework. I hadn't stepped foot in the place since long before the wedding, long before Sable had claimed the apartment as a backdrop to her curated life. The lecture hall was open for an evening story hour. I slipped inside, trying to blend into the quiet shuffle of attendees. The lights were soft, the space filled with the low murmur of conversation. I moved to the back, not seeking attention, only presence. And then I saw her. Sable. Near the far glass wall, dressed effortlessly in creams and blush tones, surrounded by a small circle of local acquaintances. Her laugh, precisely measured. Her hands, gesturing just enough to look graceful, not theatrical. She turned, mid-laugh, and saw me. For a second, she froze. The smile on her lips faltered. Her eyes widened. Then she tried to recover, to step forward as if nothing had happened, as if we were still locked in that old dance where I always yielded first. But I didn't. I turned away, walked past the shelves, past the reading room, past the voice coach I once taught, who now looked at me with cautious recognition. Sable's heels clicked once, then again, then stopped. "Atlanta?" she called. I didn't answer. She didn't follow. That moment, that breath between confrontation and quiet, felt like closure. Not rage, not vengeance, just release. At the door, I paused to tighten my coat. The cold wind from the sea curled in as the glass panels slid open. Just as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. A name flashed. My lawyer. I swiped to read. Subject, final clause of the will. We missed it the first time. My heart jumped. My eyes skimmed the first line. Something had been overlooked. I stepped to the curb. The salt air hit my skin, sharp and clean. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing. They had tried to erase me, to reshape the narrative, rewrite the truth, and steal the very walls around me. But the truth had a way of finding its voice, and this time it would speak loud enough for everyone to hear. Morning light spilled through the gauzy curtains, soft and golden, casting long slanted shadows across the wood floor. The apartment was still. No footsteps, no voices, just the quiet hum of the ocean beyond the glass. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the hush of waves and the distant cry of gulls. But even in this calm, the judgment from last night echoed faintly in my mind. Words I hadn't asked for, opinions I didn't need. Today wasn't about them. It wasn't about defending my name, my choices, or my right to grieve in silence. Today was about drawing a line, permanent and firm. I got up slowly, pulling on a soft cream blouse and a pair of dark jeans. No makeup, no accessories. I didn't need armor today, just truth. I gathered the papers I had kept safe for years, my grandmother's will, the handwritten letter she'd once slipped into my palm during a quiet afternoon on the balcony. They fit easily into a narrow leather folder. Proof. Not of ownership, but of memory, of connection. Paul's law office was just 3 blocks down, nestled in a sandstone building with ivy crawling up one side. The air smelled of sea salt and eucalyptus as I walked the quiet street, each step lighter than the last. The receptionist recognized me with a polite smile and buzzed me in. Paul was already waiting, standing beside a conference table layered with thick files, case folders, and 2 ceramic mugs of untouched coffee. He looked up and offered a gentle nod. No small talk. No pretense. "I had my assistant go over the will again," he said, sliding a familiar document toward me. "You were right to keep this safe. There's something here we missed." I took it carefully, hands steady. It was the original, slightly yellowed at the edges, but intact. As I scanned the page, my eyes caught the lines written in my grandmother's script. To the granddaughter who sat beside me when the silence was too loud. The one who listened without needing answers. This apartment and all it holds is yours. You were never second. You were always home. The room stilled. I felt my breath hitch, the tightness in my chest rising into my throat. A single tear slipped free, uninvited, but welcome. I ran my fingers gently across her words. "It wasn't about the apartment," I said softly. She wanted someone to remember her, to know that she mattered. And maybe, deep down, she wanted me to know that I did too. Paul nodded. "The clause is legally binding. It was phrased with intention. And it overrides the vague distribution claims your aunt tried to argue. You're protected." Relief, bittersweet and clean, washed through me. Back outside, the late afternoon sun hung low behind drifting clouds. We didn't talk much as we walked to the parking lot. There was nothing left to say. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt still inside. By early evening, I was back at the apartment. Mine, not by conquest, but by connection. The air inside carried that same scent I'd grown to love: salt, lemon oil, and something like lavender from the old sachets still tucked in the linen drawers. I moved through each room slowly, letting the memories flood in. The balcony where she taught me to braid rosemary stems, the kitchen counter where I first learned to slice mango without wasting the juice, the small alcove where I once curled up with a book while rain tapped the windows. In the living room, I placed a vase of fresh gardenias beside her photo and letter. Her face smiled back. Soft eyes, wise and a little mischievous. I sat for a moment, then whispered into the quiet, "I'm not leaving because I lost. I'm leaving because I've already won." And I meant it. I stood and walked through every room once more, not to say goodbye, but to reclaim each part. Every door frame, every window pane, every corner that had ever made me feel safe, I touched them all, like a final blessing. In the hallway, I paused by the security panel. My cousin had installed it under the guise of protecting family property, but it had always felt invasive. I disabled each camera, one beep at a time. Living in fear was never going to be my legacy. In the kitchen, I left a single note on the polished wood table, penned in my own hand. "This place remembers me. That's enough." Then I rolled my suitcase to the door, one final scan of the room confirming what I already knew. Nothing more needed to be taken. Nothing more needed to be said. Outside, the sky had turned a violet gray, streaked with the last blush of sunset. The Pacific stretched endlessly before me, its tide rolling in with a rhythm older than memory. I climbed the bluff trail that edged the coast, the wind rising around me, cool and cleansing. My hair lifted in strands across my cheeks, but I didn't brush it away. When I reached the overlook, I stood still, letting the salt air sting my lungs and the horizon steady my thoughts. My voice was quiet but sure. They called it selfish when I refused to disappear, when I said no, when I held the line. But this wasn't selfishness. This was survival. This was saying, "I'm here. I exist." The wind took my words and carried them to the sea. I didn't look back. As I turned to walk down the trail, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. One message, from my mother. "We need to talk, please." I read it once, then locked the screen. Some things could wait, others, never again. The salt air that morning wrapped around me like a soft shawl, gentle, unassuming. As I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, a quiet sense of belonging seeped into my bones. Sunlight streamed in across the pale rug, turning the room gold. The apartment wasn't large, no designer furniture, no dramatic view, but every corner held something I had chosen. It was mine. That made all the difference. My fingers reached toward the windowsill, where a small fern sat in a ceramic pot I had glazed myself at a weekend pottery class. It looked strong, resilient. I watered it slowly, watching each droplet sink into the dark soil like little affirmations. Behind it, the sky was an open canvas, the ocean just a breath away. There was only one photo on the wall, a framed image of my grandmother and me sitting side by side on her garden bench. Her eyes crinkled with joy, mine filled with quiet admiration. I remembered how she used to hum when she gardened. How her hands were always dirt-speckled, always creating something that bloomed. Late in the morning, I opened the leather-bound journal she had given me for my 30th birthday. Its spine was worn now, like it had exhaled all the pain it once carried. I wrote, "Not all scars fade, but I choose to wear mine like medals." The pen lingered, as if it wanted to add more, but I didn't need more. I closed the book and placed it gently on the table. Healing, I'd learned, didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting. It meant walking beside your pain without letting it lead you. By noon, I was walking along the coastline in Capitola. The sea breeze kissed my cheeks as I headed toward the small cafe we had agreed on. My mother said she would meet me at 1. I arrived early, ordered chamomile tea, and settled into a corner seat near the window. Outside, the waves curled and whispered. The horizon felt closer somehow, as though the universe was leaning in to listen. She arrived at 1:30. She stepped in carefully, like someone entering a memory. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes downcast, no makeup, no grand entrance, just her. She slid into the seat opposite mine and offered a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We sat in the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable, just necessary. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice catching. "We should have asked you first, but you've always been so quiet." I looked up, holding her gaze. Maybe that's why no one heard me until I had to get loud. Her eyes flicked away. She reached for her tea, stirring it like it could give her something to say, but no defense came. No mention of Sable, no full apology, just silence. A pause filled with everything she didn't know how to say. I didn't press. I didn't need her to rewrite the past. I had made peace with the fact that some chapters end without punctuation. Closure, I had learned, often comes not in dramatic confrontations, but in quiet acknowledgments. When she left, I watched her disappear down the boardwalk, shrinking with each step until she folded into the crowd like a ripple fading into water. Some weeks later, I heard whispers. Sable had disappeared from the spotlight. Brand deals ended, sponsors backed out. The world that once lifted her had turned away. I didn't rejoice. I didn't gloat. The truth is, I felt nothing but distance. Her fall wasn't my victory. Justice, I realized, is not revenge. Justice is being free enough to stop needing permission to move on. My days became gentler. I began volunteering at a small community garden near the bluff, started a weekly group with retirees who welcomed me with open arms and stories that spanned decades. Every Thursday, I brought cuttings, lavender, sage, rosemary, and we spoke about soil, about patience, about light. The garden bloomed with more than flowers. It bloomed with perspective. With part of the settlement money, I made a modest donation to a local women's shelter. One of the directors thanked me in person. "You didn't have to," she said. "I just want to be someone who opened a door," I replied, "for someone who's had it slammed in their face." An older woman there, her eyes sharp but kind, took my hand. "You seem like someone who's had to fight for peace." I nodded. I just finally stopped apologizing for wanting it. That evening, I walked down to the beach barefoot. The waves were soft, rhythmic, like an old lullaby. The tide reached toward my toes, then pulled away, as if inviting me to dance. The sky stretched wide, painted in shades of lavender and burnt orange. The wind tangled my hair, but I didn't mind. I closed my eyes and breathed. They said I didn't deserve that apartment. But it was never about four walls. It was about being seen, about not being erased, about having something no one else could define. Each step I took along the shore was deliberate, not out of defiance, but out of clarity, out of knowing that peace isn't something you find, it's something you build, wave by wave, choice by choice. It wasn't just a place, it was proof I existed. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing alone. Not out of pride, but because silence has been mistaken for weakness one too many times. This story isn't just about a stolen apartment. It's about reclaiming your worth when those closest to you try to rewrite your place in the family. Have you ever had to defend your space, your voice, against your own relatives? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe so you won't miss the next real-life family story that needs to be told.